Hey everyone, this is Dennis. Thanks for joining again today. We're going to talk about yet another small, compact interchangeable lens system camera. This time it's the Nikon J5, the final camera in the Nikon 1 system, and probably the best and most modern one of those cameras. It's a small, mirrorless, interchangeable lens camera that looks and feels a bit more like a point and shoot. It does a lot of the same things as some of the other cameras I've talked about do. For example, it's the same size, sensor, and resolution as the NX Mini, but this one's a little more modern feeling than that camera, and a little more sports and action oriented, with fast autofocus and burst shooting. Let's talk a little bit about the Nikon 1 system. This was Nikon's first mirrorless camera system. In order to avoid competing with their DSLR sales, they chose a very small 1-inch size sensor for this camera system. The system itself wasn't around all that long, although they released quite a few models. They had, I think, 3 lines of cameras. There was the kind of mainstream J series, like this one, as well as a slightly more SLR-styled V series with an electronic viewfinder, and then there was like a super budget S series as well. So this one is the Nikon J5, so it's the 5th one of this line. There were 3 of the V series, and there were 2, I think, of the S series. So that's a lot of cameras to put out in less than 5 years. And I believe there were 13 first-party lenses covering most of the standard focal ranges you might want, from ultra-wide to super telephoto. It's not a bad lens lineup compared to some of the other small sensor systems. The NX Mini had only 3 lenses, and even Canon's EOS M system only had about 8 first-party lenses. Of course, Micro Four Thirds has dramatically more lens variety. Unfortunately, I think a lot of the Nikon 1 system was overpriced when it was new, and especially some of the more premium lenses were very expensive. However, a lot of those prices have actually come down now, so it's a more reasonable price proposition today than it was when it was new. Let me quickly run you through some of the specs of the Nikon J5. It has a 1-inch sensor with 20.8 megapixels of resolution. The 1-inch sensor means there's a crop factor of about 2.7, so a 10mm lens ends up with an equivalent focal length of about 27 millimeters. The LCD has about 1 million dots, and the camera weighs about 345 grams with a kit lens included, and it was released in 2015. Okay, let's take a look at the camera body. You can see it's a very small camera. It feels reasonably well built. I think it's a mix of metal and plastic. It has just enough control dials for a small camera. Certainly it has more physical controls than the NX Mini had, and also more than a lot of the earlier Nikon 1J cameras had. You get one control dial next to the record button, and another dial on the back, and a PASM wheel here. So all the basic camera settings are there, with the exception of manual focus on the lenses. Sure, the buttons are a little small, and there aren't tons and tons of extra controls here, but it gets the job done, and it's about what you would expect on a higher-end compact camera. Plus, there is a touch screen, and that makes navigating the menus and everything else a little bit easier. The screen's high quality, very clear, and it flips up for selfies and vlogging. It has a very small grip, but it's not flat like some of the other cameras that I have. With longer lenses, I use a screw-on grip that I 3D printed to make it easier to hold. There's also a pop-up flash, but there's no hot shoe. A couple cons with the body. There are two key things I think are lacking. There's no USB charging, so you have to bring a charger with you when you travel, plus spare batteries. And there's no IBIS on the camera. All these zoom lenses are stabilized, which is great, but the prime lenses aren't, and that hurts the camera in low light. One thing that differentiates the J5 from my other compact cameras is its speed and performance. Like the latest Nikon Z cameras, it's actually an electronic shutter only camera, and it can shoot at pretty high speeds, up to 20 frames per second with autofocus, and even faster without, but the buffer can be slow to clear at those speeds. It does also have hybrid phase detect autofocus, which is fast and reliable, and this makes the J5 appropriate for fast action subjects and makes it feel more like a modern camera, even though it's already 8 years old at this point. Let's talk about lenses for the Nikon One system. As I mentioned, there are 13 first-party lenses, and I have 4 of them. The 10-30 kit zoom, the 10mm and 18.5mm prime lenses, and the 30-110 telephoto lens. The one you see here is the kit lens. This is a 10-30, which converts around 28-70 full frame equivalent. I kind of like this because it has a power zoom lens, and when you have it on, it really turns the camera into a real point and shoot. There's no need for a lens cap since a lens covering is integrated into it. It extends out when you turn it on, and it has a power zoom ring. Like a point and shoot, you can't attach filters to the lens, but otherwise it's kind of your standard kit lens, f3.5 to f5.6. I have 2 prime lenses. There's a 10mm f2.8. This is kind of equivalent to about a 28mm on full frame. And then this one is a 18.5mm f1.8. This is like your nifty 50. Of the two, I use the 18.5mm more. It's got the brighter aperture and I prefer the focal length. 28mm is fine, but it's not all that different from the field of view of the kit lens. And the kit lens has image stabilization. And then there is this other lens I have, which is my telephoto. It's a 30-110, and I'm really starting to like this lens a lot. I mean, it's just hard to beat the size. This lens is so much smaller than any other telephoto lens I've used. It's even significantly smaller than my equivalent micro four thirds lens. With the phase detect autofocus on the J5, it works very well, and I get a lot of shots that I just wouldn't expect to get with a small camera. It's become something that I've really started to enjoy shooting with quite a bit. There are a number of other lenses for the system. Some of the ones that I'd be most interested in are the 6.7 to 13mm ultra wide, and then there's also a 32mm f1.2 portrait lens, although both of those were very expensive. Even now on the used market, the 32mm lens still seems to be about $600. If I could find it for a good enough price, I would definitely be tempted to get it because it's supposed to be the best lens overall for the system. What do I think about the image quality of this camera? Well, it's decent for a 1-inch sensor, but it's not the best camera in terms of image quality that I've ever seen. Photos in good light are nice and sharp. There's a certain amount of highlight and shadow detail you can recover in the RAW files, but low light is only so-so. If I use some of the new AI denoising tools, I can improve the quality of the low light shots quite a bit, but ultimately it's a camera I choose to carry for convenience and casual use over top image quality. Speaking of image quality, let's take a look at some of the pictures I've taken with the J5. How does the J5 stand up as a video camera? Overall, I would say it's not too bad for a a compact camera. I mean, they did market this as a 4K camera, but that's just ridiculous. Its 4K mode is only 15 frames a second, and that's not really at all useful in the real world. But as a 1080p camera, it does pretty well at either 30 or 60 frames per second. It has good autofocus. It tracks your subjects pretty well. The video quality itself is not bad. And if you use one of the zoom lenses, stabilization's not too bad either. I wouldn't call it a camera for professional use by any means, but if you're just looking to do casual stuff, the J5 can provide some pretty satisfactory results. Here's an example of some footage I shot of a dance performance in fairly dark conditions with the 30-110 lens that I was pleasantly surprised with. So how does the Nikon J5 compare against some of the other small cameras I've talked about on this channel? First up, compared to the NX Mini, image quality is fairly comparable. They're both 20 megapixel 1-inch sensors, but I do very slightly prefer the image quality out of the NX Mini. However, in terms of body and performance, the J5 feels much faster. It has better autofocus, better controls, and it has a better screen. Plus, there are many more lenses available for the Nikon One system. Okay, compared to the Sony RX100, I think this camera came out around the same time as the RX100 Mark IV, and it's probably pretty competitive with that camera. Obviously, there are newer RX100s and now the ZV-1 series that probably have better specs than this. But you can't get a 300mm telephoto for your RX100. If you're only going to use the kit lens, I'd say the RX100 is the better buy, but if you want to change lenses, the J5 has more options. How does it compare to the slightly older Nikon Coolpix A, which I reviewed last time? They're both small, and they're both Nikons, but other than that, they have quite a different feeling to them. The Coolpix A feels more like a professional camera. It's better built, it has a larger image sensor, and it's just really designed for more serious use. But it's better suited to maybe street photography or landscape, since it's not a fast camera to use. In contrast, the Nikon One is less professional and more quote-unquote fun. It's just way faster. The autofocus is dramatically faster, and the shooting speed's faster too. Plus, you're not limited to a 28mm lens, but it's not going to have the image quality that you're going to get on the APS-C camera. And finally, I think the toughest competition comes from Micro Four Thirds. The Nikon One makes sense if you really want something both small and fast. Micro Four Thirds has cameras with faster performance for action and sports, but they're much bigger. Micro Four Thirds also has camera bodies that are just as small as the J5, but those ones aren't particularly fast. Overall, Micro Four Thirds is probably still a little larger, but it is more versatile, it's more professional, and it has more modern options. But if you really want to optimize for compactness, Nikon One still kind of makes sense. But otherwise, Micro Four Thirds is probably the more practical option. All right, so what's my conclusion for the Nikon J5? It's a very versatile camera system. It can do a lot of things fairly well, but it's not the best at anything. It's very fast and very compact, and I like those things. The lack of USB charging annoys me, but I can work around it. I do wish it could do 4K video at 30 frames a second, but I have other dedicated cameras for video. I think it can still be a nice secondary camera system for someone, but I wouldn't really recommend it as your only camera. It's also not looking too bad on the secondhand market from the price perspective. You can still get these cameras with the kit lens for, I think, between $200 and $300, and the lenses are pretty widely available, so there are lots of options there. And some of them are coming down in price as well, so that's nice. So overall, I think it's a nice versatile system that's still very usable today, and I think it works best as a secondary system for the times when you want to travel really light. So those were my thoughts on the Nikon J5. Why don't you leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like and subscribe to the channel. That's all I have for now, so thanks a lot and have a great day. Bye. Whew.